Tonight, as you settle into your cozy space, whether you're tucked into your RV bunk, wrapped in blankets by a campfire, or simply lying in bed dreaming of adventure and falling asleep to fascinating stories, let me take you on a journey far back through time, to an age when survival wasn't about GPS or grocery stores, but about ingenuity, courage, and the remarkable human spirit. Where in the world are you watching from, and what time is it for you right now? Share your answer in the comments below. Thank you. Now, close your eyes and imagine this. 3.5 million years ago, long before cities, long before farms, long before the comfort of knowing where your next meal would come from, our ancestors faced the ultimate challenge. How do you survive in a world where everything around you could end your life? When winter's cold could mean death, when finding food was a daily battle, and when the night belonged to predators with sharper teeth and stronger claws than your own. And yet, here we are, you and I, descendants of people who not only survived these impossible odds, but thrived, who spread across every continent, mastered every climate, and developed technologies so ingenious that some we still use today. This is their story, the story of how humans learned to survive during the Stone Age. And as we explore their world together, their struggles and triumphs, their innovations and discoveries, perhaps you'll find the same peaceful rest they found around their ancient fires, under stars that are the same ones watching over you tonight. So get comfortable, let your breathing slow, and let's travel back to a time when every day was an adventure in survival. Picture, if you will, the African savanna 3 million years ago. Golden grasslands stretch endlessly under a vast blue sky. Acacia trees dot the landscape like nature's umbrellas, providing precious shade from the relentless Sunday. And somewhere in this vast wilderness, a small group of our earliest ancestors huddles together, facing a problem that would change the course of human history. They've found a fallen antelope, brought down by a pride of lions who have since wandered away to rest in the shade. The meat is fresh, the opportunity rare, but how do you cut through thick hide with nothing but your hands? How do you access the nutrient-rich marrow hidden deep within heavy bones? One of them picks up a stone, not just any stone, but one with a sharp edge where it has naturally broken. They begin to work, cutting, scraping, discovering that this simple tool can do what fingernails and teeth cannot. This moment, this quiet innovation beside a carcass on the African plains, this is where technology begins. Over the next million years, these simple choppers and scrapers evolved. Our ancestors learned to strike one stone against another with precision, creating sharp edges exactly where they needed them. They developed the hand axe, that elegant teardrop-shaped tool that was so perfect, so useful, that it remained virtually unchanged for over 1 million years. Can you imagine that? A design so good that it lasted 10,000 times longer than the automobile has existed. These weren't just tools, they were the keys to survival. Carefully crafted and passed down through countless generations like precious family heirlooms. And with these tools came freedom. Freedom to process meat more efficiently, to dig roots from hard earth, to work wood and bone into other useful objects. Each innovation built upon the last, like stones carefully placed to build a bridge across the chasm of time. Now, let your mind wander forward in time to perhaps the greatest discovery in human history. Picture a small band of early humans, maybe 20 individuals, gathered in a cave as storm clouds build on the horizon. The wind howls outside, carrying with it the scent of rain and the chill of approaching winter. They've seen fire before, wild fires started by lightning, burning across the grasslands in terrifying walls of flame. But tonight, something different happens. A bolt of lightning strikes a tree nearby, and instead of running from the flames, one curious soul approaches. They watch the fire consume dry leaves and branches, notice its warmth, observe how it frightens away the glowing eyes that usually watch them from the darkness. Carefully, reverently almost, they carry a burning branch back to their shelter. They feed it dry grass, then twigs, then larger branches, and suddenly their world transforms. The cave fills with warm, dancing light. The shadows retreat to the corners, and with them, the ever-present fear of what might emerge from the darkness. For the first time in human history, the night belongs to us. But fire brought more than safety and warmth. It brought a revolution in how humans lived and ate. Meat could be cooked, making it safer and more nutritious. Plants that were once bitter or toxic became edible when roasted. Bones could be heated to extract their precious marrow more easily. Around these first hearths, something else magical began to happen. People gathered not just for warmth, but for companionship. They shared stories, passing down knowledge of where to find food, how to recognize dangerous weather, which plants could heal and which could harm. The flickering flames became the center of human culture, the heart of family life, the place where wisdom was born and shared. And every night, as the fire burned low and people settled into sleep, they felt something their ancestors had never known: security. The predators were still out there, the dangers still real, but the fire created a circle of safety, a small sphere of human dominance in a wild world. As you rest tonight, perhaps you can feel an echo of that ancient comfort, the security our ancestors found in their carefully tended flames. Let yourself drift now to the rolling hills of Ice Age Europe. Perhaps 30,000 years ago, snow caps the distant mountains, and the air carries the crisp clarity of approaching winter. Vast herds of mammoth, bison, and reindeer move across the landscape like living rivers, their breath creating clouds in the cold air. Our ancestors have learned much since those first tools and fires. They've developed the spear, not just a pointed stick, but a carefully balanced weapon with a stone point hafted with precision. They've invented the spear thrower, a simple but ingenious device that uses leverage to multiply their throwing power. But technology alone doesn't make a successful hunt. Watch as a small group of hunters moves across the landscape with the patience of shadows. They know these animals, have watched them for days, learning their patterns, their fears, their habits. They know that bison tend to move uphill when startled, that mammoths will protect their young by forming a circle, that reindeer follow the same migration routes generation after generation. The hunt they're planning isn't a chaotic chase, but a carefully orchestrated dance of cooperation and strategy. Some hunters will position themselves along escape routes. Others will slowly, quietly drive the herd toward waiting companions. They communicate with subtle hand signals, their voices barely whispers on the wind. When the moment comes, it happens with swift precision. Spears fly through the air, each one guided by years of practice and intimate knowledge of animal anatomy. A large bison stumbles, wounded but not yet fallen. The hunters close in, not with reckless bravery, but with careful coordination, ensuring both their success and their safety. But the hunt is only the beginning. Now comes the work of processing this massive animal, hundreds of pounds of meat that must be preserved before it spoils. Every part has a purpose: meat for immediate consumption and for drying into jerky, bones for tools and needles, hide for clothing and shelter, sinew for thread and bindings. Nothing is wasted. In a world where the next meal is never guaranteed, every resource is precious. The hunters work through the night by firelight, cutting, smoking, preparing. The successful hunt will feed the entire band for weeks, but only if the work is done properly. As they work, they share stories of the hunt, analyzing what went well and what could be improved. Knowledge flows between generations like a gentle stream, the old teaching the young bringing fresh insights to age-old practices. The wind picks up outside your window as our story continues, and perhaps this makes you appreciate even more the shelter that surrounds you. Our Stone Age ancestors understood this appreciation intimately, for they had to create their protection from scratch, using only what nature provided. Imagine being tasked with building a home using no nails, no lumber from a store, no tools beyond what you could make with your own hands. This was the daily reality for our ancestors, and their solutions were nothing short of brilliant. In the great grasslands, they learned to use the bones of mammoth, those giants of the Ice Age, as the framework for substantial houses. Picture 20 people working together to arrange massive tusks and leg bones into the skeleton of a dwelling, then covering this framework with carefully prepared hides, layers upon layers to keep out wind and rain and cold. These weren't temporary shelters, but engineered structures that could last for years. The builders understood concepts like weight distribution and wind resistance, though they had no formal education in engineering. They knew that certain angles would shed snow more effectively, that specific materials would provide better insulation, that proper ventilation would prevent dangerous buildup of smoke from their indoor fires. In forested regions, they developed different techniques entirely. Here, they learned to weave branches into frameworks, covering them with bark and leaves in patterns that channeled rain away while maintaining structural integrity. They discovered which woods were flexible enough for framework construction and which were best for fire-resistant elements. But perhaps most impressively, they created portable homes for their nomadic lifestyle. Imagine a dwelling that could be completely assembled in an hour, taken down in 30 minutes, and carried by a small group of people as they followed the herds across vast distances. These weren't simple lean-tos, but sophisticated structures with multiple rooms, storage areas, and carefully planned ventilation systems. The knowledge required for this construction was vast and complex. Builders had to understand the properties of dozens of different materials, the engineering principles that would keep structures stable in high winds, the optimal ways to create warmth without creating dangerous fire hazards. And all of this knowledge was stored not in books or blueprints, but in human memory, passed down through generations of careful teaching and patient learning. As they worked on these shelters, families would gather together, the construction becoming a social activity that strengthened bonds while creating protection. Children learned by helping, gradually taking on more complex tasks as their skills developed. Elderly members contributed their wisdom about materials and techniques, ensuring that hard-won knowledge wasn't lost. Each completed shelter represented not just protection from the elements, but a triumph of human ingenuity over adversity. When the storms came, and they always came, These structures stood firm, keeping families safe and warm while the wind howled outside. Let your mind drift now through the changing seasons, following our ancestors as they moved through their annual cycle of survival. Like many of us who travel in RVs, they were nomads, but their migrations followed patterns established over thousands of years, each movement timed to the subtle rhythms of the natural world. Spring arrived with the melting of winter snows, turning frozen streams into rushing rivers and awakening plants from their long sleep. Our ancestors knew exactly when the first tender shoots would emerge, when the migrating birds would return, when the fish would begin their journey upstream to spawn. This wasn't casual knowledge, but precise understanding accumulated over countless generations. They knew that certain roots would be sweetest, just as their leaves began to unfurl, that specific berries would ripen exactly 30 days after their flowers first appeared, that particular animals would be fattest and most vulnerable just before beginning their own seasonal movements. Watch them in your mind's eye as they break winter camp, carefully packing the possessions that mean the difference between life and death. Tools that serve multiple purposes, materials that can be used and reused, containers that pack efficiently while providing reliable service. The spring migration isn't rushed, but purposeful. The group moves like a well-practiced team, each person knowing their role. Scouts range ahead, looking for the best routes and potential dangers. Families travel in the center, children and elderly protected by the strongest adults. Hunters spread out to either side, always alert for opportunities to supplement their food supply. Summer brings abundance, but also the responsibility of preparation. This is when the great hunts take place, when plant foods are gathered and processed for winter storage, when essential materials are collected and crafted into tools and clothing. The long days are filled with intense activity, everyone working together toward the common goal of survival. But even in the midst of all this work, there's time for other activities. Summer is when distant bands meet, when knowledge is shared, when young people from different groups meet and perhaps choose life partners. These gatherings aren't just social occasions, but crucial exchanges of information that benefit everyone's survival. As autumn approaches, the pace intensifies. Final hunts must be completed, the last of the seasonal plants gathered and preserved, winter clothing repaired and waterproofed. There's an urgency now, but also a satisfaction in work well done. Food stores are full, shelters are prepared, and the group is ready for winter's challenges. And when winter finally arrives, when the world turns white and cold, and the long nights settle over the land, our ancestors retreat to their prepared shelters. But this isn't a time of hibernation. Winter is when stories are told, when tools are crafted and repaired, when the young are taught the complex skills they'll need as adults. Around the warm hearth, with the wind singing outside and the fire crackling cheerfully, families gather close. The day's work is done, bellies are full, and safety surrounds them like a warm blanket. In these moments, they might have felt something very similar to what you're feeling right now. The deep satisfaction of being safe, warm, and cared for. As you settle deeper into comfort, let your thoughts turn to perhaps the most remarkable survival tool our ancestors developed. Not a spear or a fire, but something far more powerful, language itself. Imagine the advantage of being able to share complex information instantly. The mammoth herd is 3 valleys east, moving north, but there are fresh lion tracks near the water. In a single sentence, crucial survival information travels faster than the swiftest runner, potentially saving lives and ensuring successful hunts. But our ancestors' language went far beyond simple information sharing. They developed rich storytelling traditions that served as libraries, encyclopedias, and instruction manuals, all combined into memorable, entertaining narratives. Picture an evening scene. The fire has burned low, casting dancing shadows on the walls of a hide shelter. Children and adults gather in a circle as the eldest member of the group begins to speak. The story might sound like entertainment, a tale of brave hunters and cunning animals, of dangerous journeys and narrow escapes, but embedded within the narrative are precise details about animal behavior, weather patterns, navigation techniques, and survival strategies. The great bear of the northern mountains, the storyteller might begin, could smell a hunter from 7 mountain peaks away, and would always circle downwind before attacking. But wise Fox knew this, and so he approached the bear's den from above, where the wind could carry no scent. What sounds like mythology is actually advanced education in predator behavior and hunting strategy, packaged in a form so memorable that it would be retained and retold accurately for generations. These stories were survival manuals disguised as entertainment, ensuring that crucial knowledge would never be lost. The storytellers themselves were living libraries, their minds containing thousands of these tales, each one encoding different aspects of survival knowledge. They knew stories about which plants were safe to eat in different seasons, which routes were safest during various weather conditions, how to read the subtle signs that predicted animal movements and weather changes, and as the stories were told and retold, they evolved and improved. New discoveries were incorporated, obsolete information was updated, and the wisdom of each generation was woven into the collective knowledge of the group. Language became the vessel that carried human wisdom across the centuries, ensuring that each generation could build upon the achievements of their ancestors. These evening storytelling sessions weren't just educational, they were deeply comforting. The familiar voices, the well-known tales, the sense of being surrounded by family and safety, these elements combined to create a profound sense of peace and security. As the stories wound toward their conclusions and the fire settled into glowing coals, listeners would drift naturally toward sleep, their minds filled with ancient wisdom and their hearts filled with contentment. In the gentle darkness of your rest, let your thoughts turn to one of the most remarkable aspects of Stone Age life, their sophisticated understanding of healing and medicine. Without hospitals or pharmacies, our ancestors developed medical knowledge that was both extensive and effective. Imagine a quiet forest clearing where an elderly woman kneels beside a patch of particular plants, her weathered hands selecting leaves and roots with the precision of a modern pharmacist. She knows exactly which parts of each plant contain the active compounds, when they should be harvested for maximum potency, how they should be prepared and combined for different ailments. Her knowledge has been accumulated over decades of careful observation and experimentation. She knows that willow bark can ease pain and reduce fever, that echinacea can boost the body's ability to fight infection, that chamomile can calm anxiety and promote restful sleep. But more than just knowing which plants to use, she understands dosages, preparation methods, and potential interactions between different remedies. This knowledge wasn't written down, but lived in human memory, passed from teacher to student through careful instruction and hands-on practice. The healing women and men of Stone Age communities were walking pharmacopoeias, their minds containing detailed information about hundreds of medicinal plants and their applications. But their medicine went far beyond herbal remedies. They developed sophisticated understanding of human anatomy, learning to set bones, treat wounds, and even perform simple surgical procedures. Archaeological evidence shows that they successfully performed operations like skull trepanation, suggesting knowledge of both anatomy and antiseptic procedures that prevented fatal infections. Picture a healing session in a Stone Age community. The patient lies comfortably on soft furs, surrounded by concerned family members. The healer works with calm confidence, cleaning and treating wounds with herbal preparations, perhaps using heated stones for thermotherapy or creating poultices that draw out infections. But the healing process involved more than just medical treatment. The entire community participated in supporting the patient's recovery, providing emotional care, ensuring adequate nutrition, and maintaining the patient's sense of connection and belonging. They understood instinctively what modern medicine is rediscovering, that healing involves the whole person, not just the physical symptoms. Pain management was particularly sophisticated, combining physical techniques with herbal medicines and psychological support. They developed methods for helping patients cope with both acute injuries and chronic conditions, ensuring that temporary disabilities didn't become death sentences in harsh survival environments. Perhaps most remarkably, they understood the connection between mental and physical health, recognizing that emotional trauma could cause physical symptoms and that physical healing required psychological well-being. Their healing practices addressed both aspects simultaneously, creating treatment approaches that were remarkably holistic and effective. As these healing sessions concluded, patients often drifted into natural, restorative sleep, their bodies relaxed by effective treatment, and their minds at peace, knowing they were surrounded by caring, knowledgeable healers. The combination of effective medicine and emotional support created ideal conditions for recovery and rest. As you rest comfortably now, let your imagination carry you to a typical day in a Stone Age community where every activity was purposeful, every person had value, and life moved at the natural rhythms that promote both productivity and peace. The day begins before dawn, not with alarm clocks, but with the gradual lightening of the sky and the awakening songs of birds. People rise naturally, their bodies attuned to the sun's cycle in ways we've largely forgotten. There's no rush, no stress about schedules, just the gentle transition from sleep to wakefulness that comes from living in harmony with natural patterns. As the community stirs to life, tasks begin organically. Someone tends the fire that has burned low through the night, adding fuel to bring it back to full warmth. Others check food stores, plan the day's activities, and begin preparing the morning meal. Children wake naturally and gradually join the adult activities, learning through participation rather than formal instruction. The distribution of work reflects both practical necessity and social harmony. Adults take on the most demanding tasks while contributing their specialized skills to the community's welfare. Teenagers gradually assume more responsibility while still receiving guidance and education. Even the youngest children have small tasks that make them feel valued and useful. There's a beautiful rhythm to the work, periods of intense activity balanced with natural rest breaks, individual tasks interwoven with collaborative projects, urgent necessities balanced with long-term planning. No one works in isolation. Everything is done within the context of community support and shared purpose. Watch in your mind as a group works together to process a successful hunt. Some people focus on butchering and meat preparation, others work on hide processing, still others tend the smoking fires that will preserve meat for future use. Conversation flows naturally as they work, sharing observations about the hunt, discussing plans for tomorrow, telling stories that make the work pass pleasantly. Children move freely among the adults, sometimes helping with simple tasks, sometimes playing games that mirror adult activities, always learning through observation and gradual participation. There's no artificial separation between education and daily life. Learning happens naturally as part of living. As the day progresses, the pace gradually slows. The most urgent tasks are completed first, followed by important but less time-sensitive work. As evening approaches, activities shift towards social and cultural pursuits, storytelling, music, crafts that are as much art as utility. The transition to evening is gradual and natural. As the sun sets, people gather around the central fire, food is shared, stories are told, and the day's activities are reviewed and discussed. There's time for individual reflection, for intimate conversations, for the kind of deep relaxation that comes from knowing that all necessary work has been completed satisfactorily. And as the fire burns lower and conversation gradually quiets, people drift naturally towards sleep. There are no artificial lights to disrupt natural rhythms, no electronic devices to stimulate minds that need rest. Just the gentle progression from wakefulness to sleep that has characterized human life for thousands of generations. In the soft glow of firelight, let your thoughts turn to one of the most beautiful aspects of Stone Age life, the reverence for wisdom and experience that made every elderly person a treasure to their community. In our ancestors' world, growing old was an achievement in itself. To survive decades in a challenging environment required not just luck, but accumulated knowledge, refined skills, and deep understanding of how to navigate life's difficulties. Those who reached advanced age were walking libraries of survival knowledge, living repositories of everything their community needed to know. Picture an elderly craftsperson, hands gnarled with arthritis but still incredibly skilled, teaching a young person to knap flint. The lesson isn't hurried or impatient, but proceeds at the pace of true understanding. The elder knows exactly which stones will work best, how to read the grain of the material, where to strike for optimal results. More importantly, they know how to teach these skills in ways that ensure the knowledge will be retained and passed on. But the elders' value went far beyond technical instruction. They were the keepers of cultural memory, the ones who remembered the great storms and droughts of decades past, who knew the locations of rarely used resources that might be crucial during emergencies, who understood the subtle patterns of climate and weather that repeated over long cycles. When difficult decisions arose, where to move during a harsh winter, how to resolve conflicts between community members, whether to attempt a dangerous river crossing, the elders' counsel was sought and respected. Their advice was based not on formal authority, but on the deep wisdom that comes from having faced and solved countless problems over many years. In the evenings, when work was done and families gathered around the fire, the elders became storytellers, historians, and teachers. They shared not just information, but understanding, the kind of deep knowledge that comes from living through many seasons of challenge and success. Their stories weren't just entertaining, but were carefully constructed lessons that prepared younger people for situations they had not yet encountered. The relationship between young and old was one of mutual benefit and respect. The young provided physical strength and energy for demanding tasks, while the elderly contributed wisdom, skill, and guidance. Everyone understood that they would someday be elderly themselves, and the care they showed to their elders would be returned to them in their own later years. Even when elders could no longer participate in physically demanding activities, They remained valuable and valued members of the community. They might spend their days crafting tools, preparing medicines, teaching children, or simply providing the kind of emotional stability and continuity that comes from having lived through many cycles of challenge and recovery. And when evening came and the community settled toward sleep, it was often an elder's gentle voice that provided the final story of the day, perhaps a simple tale of everyday courage or ancient wisdom, or the comforting knowledge that tomorrow would bring new opportunities and adventures. These bedtime stories, told by voices rich with experience and love, provided the perfect transition from the activities of the day to the peaceful rest of night. As you drift deeper into comfort and peace, let your mind follow our ancestors through their eternal dance with the changing seasons, a rhythm so ancient and so natural that your own body still remembers it in its deepest patterns. Imagine yourself as part of this timeless cycle, moving through the year with the quiet confidence that comes from deep understanding of natural patterns. Spring arrives not as a date on a calendar, but as a subtle shift in the light, a change in the wind's direction, the first tentative songs of returning birds. You feel the awakening earth beneath your feet as frozen ground begins to soften, as the first green shoots push through the last patches of snow. Your ancestors knew exactly when these changes would occur, could read the subtle signs that predicted not just what would happen but when and where. This knowledge was their calendar, their weather forecast, their planning guide for the year ahead. Summer brings its own rhythm, longer days filled with purposeful activity, but also time for rest during the heat of midday. Picture yourself moving through sun-dappled forests, gathering berries that are perfectly ripe, selecting medicinal plants at their peak potency, feeling the satisfaction of steady, meaningful work. The abundance of summer isn't just enjoyed, but carefully managed. Some foods are eaten fresh, others are dried or processed for storage. Nothing is wasted, but neither is there a sense of frantic urgency. The work proceeds at a sustainable pace that allows for rest, for social interaction, for the simple pleasure of being alive on a beautiful day. Autumn arrives with its own particular magic, the crisp air that signals the beginning of the harvest season, the changing colors that indicate which plants are ready for final gathering, the behavioral changes in animals that predict weather patterns for the coming winter. Your ancestors read these signs like pages in a familiar book, understanding exactly what each change meant for their survival strategies. The autumn work is intensive but satisfying. The final great hunts, the processing and storage of winter food supplies, the completion of clothing and shelter preparations that will ensure comfort during the cold months ahead. But there's also a sense of celebration, of gratitude for the year's abundance, of satisfaction in work well done. And then winter settles over the land like a soft white blanket. The world grows quiet, the pace of life slows, and people turn inward toward the warmth of home and family. This isn't a time of hardship, but of different pleasures, intimate conversations around the fire, the satisfaction of well-prepared comfort, the peaceful rhythm of indoor activities. Picture yourself in a warm, secure shelter as snow falls gently outside. The fire crackles cheerfully, casting dancing shadows on the walls. Someone is working on a piece of intricate craftwork. Others are engaged in quiet conversation. Children are playing games that will teach them skills they'll need as adults. There's no sense of time pressure, no artificial deadlines to meet. The winter will last as long as it lasts, and when spring returns, it will be time for spring activities. But for now, this moment is complete in itself, warm, secure, peaceful, and filled with the quiet satisfaction of being exactly where you need to be. As the evening deepens and conversation gradually quiets, people begin to settle towards sleep. The fire is banked to burn slowly through the night, providing gentle warmth and comfort. One by one, family members find their sleeping places, surrounded by soft furs and the familiar presence of loved ones. The last sounds of the day are gentle ones, perhaps a soft lullaby, the whisper of wind in the trees outside, the quiet crackling of the fire. And then, gradually, peacefully, sleep comes naturally and completely, the kind of deep, restorative rest that comes from living in harmony with natural rhythms. And so our journey through time comes full circle, back to this moment, this place, this peaceful transition towards sleep. You've traveled with our ancestors through their world of challenge and triumph, of ingenuity and courage, of wisdom and love. Perhaps you've noticed how their lives, despite the hardships, contained elements we sometimes miss in our modern world. The deep satisfaction of meaningful work, the security of belonging to a close-knit community, the peace that comes from living in harmony with natural rhythms, the wisdom that emerges from understanding our place in the larger patterns of life. Our ancestors faced each day with courage, met each challenge with creativity, and found each evening a time of gratitude and rest. They knew something we're still learning, that survival isn't just about staying alive, but about living with purpose, connection, and hope. Tonight, as you rest in your comfortable space, whether it's your RV traveling down moonlit highways, your tent under a canopy of stars, or your own bed in the safety of home, you carry within you the wisdom and strength of all those who came before. Their courage flows in your blood, their ingenuity sparks in your mind, their love surrounds you like an invisible embrace. The same moon that watched over their evening fires shines down on you tonight. The same stars that guided their migrations twinkle peacefully above your head. The same deep rhythms that shaped their lives still beat steadily in your heart. And in this connection across time, in this shared humanity that bridges the millennia, perhaps you can find the same peaceful rest that our ancestors found after their long days of meaningful work and purposeful living. The same deep satisfaction, the same quiet gratitude, the same gentle transition from the activities of the day to the restorative peace of sleep. Let their ancient wisdom whisper you toward rest. Let their timeless courage give you strength. Let their enduring love surround you with comfort and peace. Sleep well, fellow traveler. Dream of ancient fires and distant stars, of courage and wisdom, of the endless human story of which you are such a precious part. And know that tomorrow, like them, you'll wake to new adventures, new possibilities, and the continuation of the remarkable human journey that began so long ago around those first warming fires.